Are you a bit like me? You've got itchy feet, a little bit bored of life down here on planet Earth? It's cool, I've got you covered. Let's explore the wide open universe, light years away. We'll do it all and come back in about half an hour. It's a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. My name is Dan. This is the only show that truly uncovers all of the most shocking science secrets. This week, we'll dive into DNA. What is it? What does it do? How is it made? And how it shapes who you are.
DNA is the building block of all life as we know it, really. The most predominant genetic material that is present in pretty much every living cell.
And our quest to find the greatest science around continues. This week, we're exploring ecology and how environments affect the way animals live.
Ecology is the science that helps us to really understand all the different creatures, from little ants to giant elephants, and how they interact with one another and the environment that they live in.
And for our Dangerous Dan this week, we are heading under the ocean to find something erupting way down deep. It's on the way in a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. Let's start with your science in the news. The astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore have finally returned back to Earth after their 8-day mission in space lasted for 9 months. You might remember that we spoke about this, well, almost 9 months ago now. They left in June 2024. They arrived at the International Space Station, but there was a problem with the spacecraft that brought them there, so they couldn't go home on it. So instead, they've been on the ISS for the whole time, much longer than planned, orbiting 250 miles above the Earth. They've been kept busy though. They've been doing tests and experiments, conducting spacewalks. They replaced a reflector device and the light filters on a telescope too. They had Christmas dinner up there, even managed to vote in the USA presidential elections. And finally, they made it home, touching down into the ocean just a few days ago. What a remarkable story. Just think how incredible our technology is. That, yeah, something's gone wrong. They're up there, but they can stay alive, they can keep busy, and we can go and get them. How miraculous is it that we live in the time that we do with what's happening in space? Also this week, a penguin from a colony from an aquarium up in Hull in the UK is in with a chance of being the world's best penguin. His name? Brian. He lives at the Deep on the east coast of England, and he's the oldest member of the Gen 2 colony of penguins there. He's in the running for the crown in a contest put together by Penguins International, which involves 48 of the birds from all around the world. He's up against Ike, who's a penguin from a zoo in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over in the States, in the first round. People will be able to vote for their favourite. Those who know Brian think that he's a surefire to win. He's got a huge personality, a very particular taste in food, and a colourful love life. And they say that Brian even got a birthday card from a big penguin fan. So Brian, you've got all my luck, mate. I really hope that you do it. Let's go, Brian. And our final story this week, more than 400 years after becoming extinct in England, beavers have been released back in the wild. 2 pairs have been released in a nature reserve down in Dorset. It's on the south coast. We can find out more with Kevin Wilding from Rewilding Britain, who has been crucial to all of this. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. How long has this process taken?
Hi Dan, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you today to talk about beavers. They're such an amazing animal. And this process of getting beavers back into the wild in England has taken a long time. It has been well over 5 years in the making to get here. And we've all been anticipating this moment for such a long time. It's been the hard work of a number of organisations and dedicated people to get to this point. And to see those beavers come out into the wild there for the first time in England has just been an amazing experience.
Because it's a unique thing where, as I said, beavers went extinct 400 years ago, but they have been back in England on a river, right? And now there's something particular happening where they're being re-released into the wild. So can you just try and explain all of those details for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been beavers that have been living in enclosures in Britain for a long time, and some of those during time managed to find their way out and escape into the wild. So what's happened where that's been the case in one area in England and an area in Scotland is that rather than remove those beavers from the wild, an experiment was set up to see what happens when beavers are back in the wild. And that was used as the evidence to go, this is good, this is something we should do. And now people can officially apply to do that on their own land in England for the first time in over 400 years.
So it seems a bit amazing that there's been so much thought about bringing beavers back, right? Surely they're an animal, they're kind of cute, they've got a big tail, chunky teeth. What questions did the people in power need to think about when they were doing these experiments? How much could a beaver in the wild impact everything around it?
Well, one of the really exciting things about beavers is that they're what we call a keystone species. They're a super ecosystem engineer, which means that where they live in the wild, they have a much bigger impact on what happens than lots of other animals do. They create new habitats. By that we mean they make big ponds and wetlands. They change how woodlands work. They do all these things, which is a lot more than sort of maybe a small animal does, like a frog or something like that does. And that means that they can provide habitats for new animals, for animals that didn't have anywhere to live before. But it also means that in Britain, where we have a lot of people working on the land and where we have a lot of different uses for land, that it's important to know what would happen if areas were to be flooded by beavers. So there are areas where we would like that to happen, and there are areas where that might cause some difficulties for people. And we have to know how we would deal with those, how we make sure we can learn to live with an animal that's been gone for a long time. And in Britain, because we're an island, the animals can't come back on their own. So at the end of the day in Britain, it's a decision that people have to make. Whereas in Europe, where it's more connected across the land, animals come back on their own and then a decision has to be made when they're there. But in Britain, we always have to make sure that communities, people and those that are affected are part of that decision making. And that can take time, and it should take time.
When we're thinking about the grander ecosystem where beavers might find themselves after being re-released into the wild, what other animals might be negatively impacted? What little critters could get eaten?
By a beaver themselves. One of the really common misconceptions or things that people think about beavers is that they eat fish and things like that. But beavers are actually completely herbivores. They only eat trees and plants. And that's one of the wonderful things about them. They come out of the water into the woodlands by the river, and they cut down trees, and that's what they actually eat. But they also build their homes out of it. And one of the things they do is they'll leave trees at the side of the river that they don't use. And one of the wonderful, amazing things that happen with beavers is they do a thing called coppicing, where those trees will then start to grow shoots of new trees out of them. And this creates a more complicated and fun environment for the woodland, where little animals like frogs and toads and insects can all find new homes to live in. And that's just one of the great things they do. But beavers themselves wouldn't harm any other animals with the work that they do for us on the rivers.
I said at the start, more than 400 years ago now, beavers were made extinct in England. How do we go about getting them back? What happens? Do we get a beaver from over in America, bring it here and hope it kind of makes kids? What goes on?
So there's a lot that happens for this, and what we call the genetic diversity of beavers is really important. So one of the things we consider is how related are the different beavers that we can get, and do we have the right species? So the one that we would have here is the Eurasian beaver, so the European one, the one that would have been here native when we were connected to the mainland Europe back many, many years ago. And at the moment, what we can do is we have many beavers in Scotland. We don't have quite so many in England. So one of the things we'll be looking at is reinforcing, so making the population stronger in England through bringing beavers from places where we talked about they might be having a less positive impact, or places where we don't quite want them to do their damming activities. We can move them from there and put them into places where we would want that to happen. So that's one of the considerations that will be taking place just now.
You said that we could apply to kind of have beavers. Can I get a beaver in my flat?
Well, I don't know how big your flat is, but I'd probably not recommend having one in your home. But yeah, they're a wonderful animal, and what we kind of look for is that the habitat is right for them. So there is woodland along river edges, that there are areas where perhaps We've changed the landscape where we have farming, our houses, our woodlands, and that those areas are now getting flooded with the rainfall that we have. So what we would look for are areas where we can have a positive impact with beavers, where we can slow the flow of water off the land, where it can get held in the landscape for longer, giving the water a chance to run away much more slowly. So you start to look for where are the best places we could have beavers and people could live alongside them.
Well, it's been tremendous to hear all about it. What a project, what a thing to do. Kevin Cumming, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much for Kevin Cumming, for coming on the show, talking all about wild beavers. Imagine that, they are back, being rehomed, being slightly released into England 400 years after becoming extinct. Just imagine the amount of thought, planning, research to make that work and to not really disturb the local environment too much. Let's get to your questions, shall we? If you've ever got anything sciencey that you want answered on the podcast, well, make sure you leave it as a voice note, right? You can do that on the Free Fun Kids app. Really easy. Just click the button, record it there. You could do it on the Free Fun Kids app too. It'll come through to me. You'll star in the podcast and we'll sort out your question, either by me or I'll get one of my genius mates to do it for you. One of those in just a sec. First question this week is from Razzi, who is in Germany. Hey, Razzi. Razzi wants to know, why does he have two different coloured eyes? Razzi, that's due to something called heterochromia. It's all to do with the amount of melanin in each eye. We've spoken about melanin before. It's a pigment. And the amount of the pigment that you have all over your body and everywhere, really, it determines how dark or bright something is. It absorbs and reflects light. In your body, you have melanin in your skin, in your eyes, in your hair. And the amount of it you have is determined by your DNA. More about what that is in just a sec, by the way. Now, if you have one eye different coloured from another, you have something called complete heterochromia. Most of it is inherited, normally through your genes, your DNA. And because of that, because it is inherited, if someone in your family, maybe your parents, your grandparents, have two different coloured eyes, there's a chance you might have it too. Or perhaps you've got heterochromia because of a health condition. It can cause that sometimes, maybe an illness, or maybe you've had an eye injury which has changed the composition of your eye, the melanin that's in there, which alters how it looks, really. So that's why you have two different coloured eyes, Razzi. A few reasons. It's all to do with the amount of pigment that's in there, and there are a few things that determine that, all right? Thank you for the question. I've mentioned DNA quite a few times, haven't I? Let's sort that out, shall we? Here's a question from Arun. What do you have, Arun?
Hello, Dan. My name is Arun, and I would like to know how this DNA gets made.
Well, Arun, thank you so much for that question. Like the fundamental building block of life, it tells us who we are. It gets passed down through our ancestors. It's an amazingly complicated question, and we'll try and sort it out. To help us, we have Dr. Aravindan Ilangovan from Queen Mary University. So, Aravindan, let's start, I guess. Just tell us what DNA is.
So, as you described, Dan, DNA is the building block of all life as we know it, really. So, DNA is the most predominant genetic material that is present in pretty much every living cell there is. So, that has a lot of information. That information is passed down from one generation to the other. And within that certain generation, the life, let's say a single cell, a bacteria, or a human cell even, use that information. They use it, and then they use that information to cellular processes.
So I am 5'9". I have strawberry blonde hair. I have blonde eyes. All of that is information that's in my DNA. It may be if you get ill at a certain point in your life, that might be in there as well. And it's in all of our cells, right, Aravindan? It kind of keeps there.
That is correct. Yeah, they're all packed within a small zone or a region within a cell, so-called the nucleus. Whereas in the human cells, whereas in other more primitive cells like the bacteria, there's no zones or regions within them, but they are secluded into a small area.
And we might have seen DNA be shown as pictures by almost a ladder that twists all around. Is that actually how it looks under a microscope in our cells, or does that just help us picture it, Aravindan?
That's a close sort of interpreted image of how it looks like. That's good. But the structure of DNA, you know, which is something we study in the laboratory. So they do have a much more complex structure, but the picture that you see is a schematic or a graphical view.
So in those, the rungs of the ladder that twists round as we see it, how is all that information stored?
DNA, the genetic material DNA, is made up of is a long single molecule. Right, the length is varies from cell to cell or the organism to the organism, but essentially it's one long single chain, right? Single molecule. So they're made up of repeating units of 4 molecules essentially. So it's A, T, G, C. So they're the 4 building blocks. So they're just in different combinations.
And it's the amount of A, C, G, and T's that will tell us what colour hair we have, what our eyes are.
The combination. Yeah, the combination actually does that.
So it's the combination. It's like it's like a really deep code. Now, let's get to Arun's question then. Now, we've kind of touched on what DNA is. How is it made, Aravindan?
DNA has 2 strands. So they are duplicated, essentially. So you have one strand, they get separated at the beginning. So this process is called DNA replication. This happens once every cell cycle. Each cell goes through a cycle, and at the start of the cell cycle, the DNA has to be duplicated or replicated. It's called DNA replication. At the very beginning, DNA, which, like I said, it's 2 strands, top and bottom. They are in contact with each other. Okay, they are making contact with each other. They have to be separated. So they have to be separated. Once they are separated, each strand acts as a sort of a template, if you will, to make a copy against each other. So now one copy separates 2 strands, and these 2 strands will make 2 copies of DNA. And at the end of cell division, they are passed on to two daughter cells.
Wow. Okay. And the uses of DNA, I mean, at the moment, Aravindan, it can help us figure out not just our ancestors like my great-grandfather, but we can go back, hundreds of thousands of years to discover more about the people who were first walking on planet Earth, can't we?
Yes, in essence, yes, you can. With nowadays, with the sequencing technology, since there's been a boom in the genomics, this field is called. Now we are able to sequence individual genomes, the entire DNA package, if you will, and then understand. And one of the other field is to study ancient DNA, and people from the fossils, they can study this DNA and then try to understand our forefathers, if you will.
We say DNA, just those 3 words. I know it's short for something very long and complicated. Just to tell us what it stands for.
It's deoxyribonucleic acid.
There we go. Thank you so much. As they say, it's a huge concept. I hope that's helped you understand it just a little bit more, Arun. Thank you so much for your question. If you have anything that you'd love answered on the show, make sure you leave us a voice note on the free Fun Kids app. You can do it at funkidslive.com too. Dr. Aravindan Ilangovan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's get on to this week's Dangerous Dan then, where we are headed under the ocean to take a look at submarine volcanoes. These are eruptions that happen deep under the surface, not on little enclosed boats that hover around under the sea. No, these are submarines as in they're just under the ocean, but they're way deep down, normally along the boundaries of tectonic plates where the Earth rubs against each other. There could be small gaps in the fabric of our planet, letting whatever is underneath, all that pressure bubbling away, it lets it rush to the surface. And there's a few reasons why volcanic eruptions deep down under the ocean can be fairly dangerous. The lava that erupts can be extremely hot. It can completely devastate marine ecosystems, creatures, plants that live nearby. Also, the eruptions release gases, sulfur, carbon dioxide into the ocean. Enough of that and nothing can breathe. It creates what's called dead zones, where life simply cannot survive. Also, these submarine volcanoes create hydrothermal vents, which release superheated water, pumping deadly chemicals across the ocean, meaning that the area around the vents can be harsh, can be very dangerous. One of the most devastating effects of these things is the potential to cause a tsunami. When a submarine volcano erupts, the release of the gas, the lava, the pressure, it can move a large amount of water. That wave can build up speed, making something bigger, which sweeps across the ocean, towering to a great height, and it can cause absolute devastation whenever it reaches the land. Now, these underwater volcanoes can create new islands too. As that lava spews through the sea, it cools down when it reaches the top, and it can create brand new lands. So there's so much going on with these submarine volcanoes, and because so much of it can be utterly deadly, it means they earn a place on our Dangerous Dan list. This week, taking on the challenge to prove why their field should come first in our Battle of the Sciences leaderboard, we are investigating everything all around you, all the creatures, all the plants, how they all interact. We're talking ecology today with Dr. Becky Thomas. Becky, you have a minute to tell us why ecology is the greatest science of them all. That minute starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Great. Well, studying ecology is like being a nature detective. Ecology is the science that helps us to really understand all the different creatures, from little ants to giant elephants, and how they interact with one another, and the environment that they live in. If you don't understand ecology, then you can't also save species who are becoming really rare. One great example of this is off the coast of California. Sea otters were hunted to near extinction. When they were removed, the massive kelp forest that they lived in, which was also home to loads of different species, began disappearing, but we didn't really know why. So what happened? Well, ecology helps us to understand the answer. The otters ate sea urchins. When there were no more otters left, sea urchins munched away at the kelp at a really unsustainable rate. And when the sea otters started to return, they managed the numbers of sea urchins, and it helped keep everything in balance again. Now, there are loads of humans living on the planet, so over 8 billion people, and we need to figure out how we can support ourselves while also giving space for nature, because nature provides us with really important things like the oxygen we breathe and the water that we drink.
Becky, that's your minute. Just a brilliant example, though, with the otters. Now, it seems to me, listening to you, that ecology is quite a wide science. You're talking about how different creatures interact with each other, how we interact with them. We're problem solving throughout nature. What does the bulk of what you do every day as an ecologist, when you're like researching and studying different creatures, what does it involve?
Well, I work at university, so a lot of my job is teaching and then doing research as well. I'm an urban ecologist, so I study the way that humans affect the environment, so the way that our actions affect natural species. So one project that I've been working on recently has been looking at the way that dog walking affects nature, so bird responses to the environment and the kind of effects on them. I've done loads and loads of different types of projects and things, worked on all sorts of species, from leopards in South Africa to domestic cats in the UK. So it is quite varied.
And does that kind of project just come from you out and about having a look and thinking, oh, I wonder how dog walkers and the dogs that they're walking are affecting the birds? Is that where kind of all these things come from?
Yeah, I think that's the really exciting thing about science, and especially the exciting thing about ecology, is that we're all really connected to the natural world. And when I walk around and sort of ask questions about different things, so I've done projects as well on things like grey squirrels. How do grey squirrels affect the feeding behaviour of birds on bird feeders? Because obviously grey squirrels are not native to the UK. We would normally have red squirrels around here, and they've been brought in. What kind of effect do these invasive non-native species have? And with the dog walking project, I was out bird watching, and I saw this man let off these 3 massive golden retrievers, and then they just went running off through the heathland, scaring all the birds and stuff. So it's just about asking really, really cool questions.
And what have you learned generally about how humans interact with animals and how they interact with each other, because it's something that we can't always change, right? We are living on this planet too. So some things that we do may well affect the local ecosystem. How much have you learned about that balance?
Loads. So I think we affect nature in lots of different ways, and many of them in positive ways. You know, people can go around and they can join local wildlife groups, and they can do tree replanting, and they can, you know, feed birds in their garden and do it kind of safely. But of course, there are negative ways that are affecting species as well. But there are quite often, once people know about them and the effect that they can be having, there are simple ways to kind of make things a bit better for nature, so that we can all live alongside each other happily.
And you said right at the start that you study how different animals interact and communicate with each other. How much studying does it take to decipher how one animal is kind of talking to another through the strange noises that they make?
It can be really hard. In some cases, really easy. I work a lot on birds. They make a lot of noise. They're in the breeding season, especially, they're shouting at each other all the time. They're like, "Get out of my territory," or "Come here, ladies." You know, it's sort of the males calling to the females. But other species interact in ways that are really difficult for us to detect. So fungi interact with trees and plants and sort of help them kind of survive and thrive in the world. And they communicate with each other. But those types of communications obviously are really difficult to kind of interpret and understand. But that's why it's so exciting to get involved in science, that you can be involved in uncovering all these different stories and activities.
Becky, let me throw you forward, way forward into the future, by the time that you kind of call time on your career as an ecologist. What's the one question that you'd love to answer? What do you really want to know in your field?
That is an excellent question. I think it would be about, how do we live alongside nature? How do we live happy, healthy lives where we feel connected to nature and, you know, connected with the natural world, and other species able to have the space to thrive as well. So I think just being able to, you know, figure out a way that we can live aside each other happily.
Well, we've learned so much about different creatures and how they interact, how we can interact with them as well. Dr. Becky Thomas, thank you for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
What do you think? Ecology, creatures, environments, connecting, whether they're thriving or simply surviving? Does ecology have a place on our Battle of the Sciences leaderboard? I wonder. We need to figure this out really soon, actually. While we're thinking of creatures, you remember earlier on in the show, we chatted to Kevin Cumming from Rewilding Britain, all about the return of wild beavers to England 400 years after they became extinct. We can find out a bit more about creatures now, actually, and take a look at rivers with Echo Gecko, who is a lizard who loves ecology. Ecology, as we've just heard with Becky, it's all about finding out how living things in the environment work together. So let's take a bit of that. Let's be inspired by beavers and meet Echo Gecko in some rivers to find out more.
Echo Gecko is brought to you by Fun Kids with the British Ecological Society, advancing ecology and making it count.
Hello, I'm Echo Gecko, a lizard who loves ecology. Did you know that the word ecology comes from Greek words meaning study of the household? That means that ecology is the study of the household of living things, their neighbours and neighbourhood. Why don't you join me as we find out more? Today I'm paddling around in a river and following its journey down to the sea. Rivers usually start in mountains from melting ice or groundwater and eventually flow into the sea. Here in the upper reaches of the river, the water is very deep and flows very fast. The fast-flowing and bubbling water picks up lots of oxygen from the air, and when it merges with springs from under the rocks, it soaks up loads of minerals, including calcium. Perfect for fish like crayfish and trout who love these conditions, but it's not for all fish, even though it sounds like a refreshing place to be. Farther downstream in the middle reaches of a river, water moves a bit more slowly. This means plants like these pretty crow's foot with their big yellow and white flowers can grab a hold on the riverbed without getting washed away. Tiny shellfish and insect larvae do better in these shallower depths too, including the mayfly. As an adult, it only lives for 24 hours. That's probably why it sounds so angry. When a river gets close to the sea, the fresh water that it has brought mixes with the seawater in an area called the estuary. plant and animal life here has to adapt to live with both fresh and salty water. Here we are now, and it looks rather muddy and horrible. Water here moves more slowly and doesn't look very nice, often muddy with the silt from the bottom. But amazingly, estuaries have a lot in common with tropical coral reefs. Even though they're not as colourful as a coral reef, estuaries are full of all sorts of life, including flatfish, bass and mullet, with lots of wading birds such as the oyster catchers picking tasty treats like cockles out of the mud. Cockles have been a yummy snack for humans for centuries, especially in London, which isn't very surprising when you think that London is on a very large estuary. It's at the end of the Thames.
Eco Bite. Closer to home, did you know you can see ecology in action in and around ponds near you? Your pond might be a permanent home to many plants and animals, but others only live in the water for parts of their lives. Many pond organisms have adult stages, which are not aquatic and may travel to different ponds to find a mate and lay their eggs. The common toad, damselfly and dragonfly are like this. If you want to catch a glimpse of an adult dragonfly, why not try gently disturbing the bushes and trees around ponds? You may see the adults fly out.
You've got more from Echo Gecko and loads more podcast series stuffed full of science wherever you're listening to this. Google, Apple, Spotify. It's also on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com. If you would like to star in this podcast next week, make sure you leave your question on our website. You can do it on the app too. Fun Kids, we are a children's radio station from the UK. Listen all over the country on our app at funkidslive.com. And if you've got a smart speaker, wake it up, ask it to play Fun Kids, and I will see you really soon with a brand new Fun Kids Science midweekly.